Blood dripping from her palm, Zoe Washington stared at the frozen departure screens as hundreds of passengers erupted in chaos. Just 20 minutes ago, she'd been ordered to "wait outside" by Captain Russell. Now, at 16, she'd brought America's fifth-largest airline to its knees. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you believe everyone deserves equal treatment regardless of skin color. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how this young aviation genius turns discrimination into justice. The morning sun cast long shadows across Zoe Washington's bedroom as she carefully laid out her outfit for what would become the most important day of her young life. A crisp white button-down shirt, navy blue blazer, and matching slacks, professional attire she'd saved 3 months of weekend tutoring money to purchase. On her desk sat a letter, its edges worn from countless readings, announcing her as the winner of Transamerican Airlines' prestigious Future Flyers essay contest. "You've got this, baby girl," Zoe whispered to herself, echoing the words her father used to say before every important event in her life. Andre Washington had been an aerospace engineer, his brilliance matched only by his dedication to showing his daughter that the sky, quite literally, held no limits for her dreams. At 16, Zoe was already exceptional. She maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA at Benjamin E. Mays High School in Atlanta despite the heavy emotional toll of losing her father to a car accident 2 years earlier. Her essay on "Innovation in Commercial Aircraft Safety Systems" had beaten out 3,000 other submissions, earning her the prize, a full day shadowing Transamerican Airlines pilots at Atlanta International Airport. "You got your ID? The confirmation letter?" Kayla Washington called from the kitchen, where she was gulping down coffee before her 12-hour shift at Grady Memorial Hospital. As a nurse working double shifts to keep their family afloat after Andre's death, Kayla rarely had time to attend Zoe's school events or celebrations. "Yes, Mom. And my notebook for taking notes, and Dad's old aviation textbook for reference," Zoe replied, patting her messenger bag. The textbook had been her most treasured inheritance. Pages filled with her father's neat handwriting in the margins, sharing insights beyond what the text provided. Zoe's grandmother, Alma, appeared in the doorway, her eyes crinkling with pride. "Your daddy would burst with joy seeing you today." Unlike Kayla, whose grief had manifested as emotional distance, Alma had channeled her son's memory into supporting Zoe's passion for aviation. It was Alma who had first shown Zoe how to fold paper airplanes, Alma who had taken her to air shows, and Alma who had encouraged her to enter the essay contest. "I know, Grandma," Zoe said, carefully placing her father's pilot's watch, another keepsake, on her wrist. Too big for her slender arm, she'd wrapped the band with tape to make it fit. "I'm going to make him proud today." "Child, you already have," Alma assured her, adjusting Zoe's collar with weathered hands. For weeks, Zoe had been preparing for this opportunity. She had memorized specifications for Transamerican's entire fleet, studied cockpit layouts of their Boeing and Airbus aircraft, and researched the flight routes departing Atlanta that day. In her room, model airplanes hung from the ceiling, each one assembled with meticulous care alongside her father before his death. "Don't let anybody intimidate you," Kayla said, kissing Zoe's forehead before grabbing her car keys. "You earned this chance. Remember what Dad always said. Knowledge is power, but courage gives it wings," Zoe recited, the family mantra comfort on her lips. An hour later, Zoe stood before the imposing glass and steel structure of Atlanta International Airport's Terminal E, her heart hammering against her ribs. The employee entrance loomed ahead, a gateway to her dreams and a test of her resolve. With one deep breath, she straightened her shoulders and walked forward, clutching her contest winner letter and school ID like talismans against doubt. The employee entrance of Atlanta International Airport buzzed with activity as uniformed staff swiped badges and hurried through security checkpoints. Zoe approached the first security officer, a stern-faced man whose expression didn't soften when she explained her purpose. "Contest winner?" "Don't know nothing about that," he said, barely glancing at her letter. Employee entrance is for employees only. Passenger terminal is that way. He gestured vaguely behind her. But sir, the letter specifically says to come to the employee entrance at 7:30 a.m., Zoe insisted, pushing down the anxiety rising in her throat. I'm supposed to meet PR Director Wesley Phillips. The security officer's eyes narrowed. Let me see some ID. When Zoe produced her school identification, he scoffed. This isn't government-issued ID. You can't access secure areas with this. Is there a problem here? A tall man in a crisp suit approached, his Transamerican Airlines badge identifying him as Wesley Phillips, PR Director. Relief flooded through Zoe. Mr. Phillips. I'm Zoe Washington, the Future Flyers contest winner. Recognition flashed across Phillips' face, followed by what seemed like momentary surprise, quickly masked. Of course, Zoe. We've been expecting you. He turned to the security officer. She's with me today, Jim. Special program. As Phillips escorted her through the security checkpoint, Zoe couldn't help noticing the officer's lingering stare. It wasn't the first time she'd encountered such skepticism, but today was too important to let it dampen her spirits. Sorry about that, Phillips said, leading her through a maze of corridors. Security protocols are strict these days. The flight crew is preparing for Transamerican Flight 1382 to Chicago. That's the flight you'll be shadowing today. They arrived at a briefing room where 3 uniformed crew members were reviewing documents. First Officer Brady Kendall, a younger pilot with friendly eyes, immediately stood to greet her. Flight Engineer Terrence Murphy offered a warm smile and firm handshake. But it was Captain Howard Russell who commanded the room. A tall man with silver hair and cold blue eyes that assessed Zoe with unmistakable disapproval. This is our contest winner. Captain Russell asked, his tone suggesting disbelief. Yes, this is Zoe Washington, Phillips confirmed. Her essay on safety innovations was exceptional. Captain Russell extended his hand reluctantly. ID, he asked, the first word directed at her. Zoe produced her school ID and contest winner letter, which Russell examined far longer than necessary. These check out, he finally admitted, though his tone suggested the opposite. Zoe will be shadowing the crew today as part of our Future Flyers program, Phillips explained. We're honored to have you, First Officer Kendall said genuinely. Always good to see young people interested in aviation. The pre-flight briefing began, with Captain Russell detailing weather conditions, flight plans, and potential challenges. When he mentioned an uncommon approach procedure due to wind conditions, Zoe couldn't help herself. Will you be using the modified RNAV approach that was implemented last month? She asked politely. The room fell silent. Captain Russell's eyebrows rose dramatically. You're familiar with approach procedures? My father was an aerospace engineer, Zoe explained. I've studied the Atlanta approaches extensively. Russell's jaw tightened. This is a professional briefing, not a classroom. Please hold questions until the appropriate time. The tension in the room was palpable as the briefing continued. When it concluded, First Officer Kendall gave Zoe an encouraging smile. That was impressive knowledge. Don't mind the captain, he's old school. The cockpit tour began with Flight Engineer Murphy explaining the various systems with obvious respect for Zoe's knowledge. When she correctly identified a rarely used backup system, Murphy exchanged a surprised glance with Kendall. You've done your homework, Murphy commented. Captain Russell, however, seemed increasingly irritated by Zoe's expertise. When she asked about recent updates to the flight management system, he cut her off. That's proprietary information, he snapped, though it wasn't. As the pre-flight preparations intensified, Russell's hostility became more pronounced. He questioned Zoe's presence at every turn, double-checking her credentials repeatedly, and making comments about standards being lowered these days. The pivotal moment came when the crew needed to perform final systems checks. Captain Russell turned to Zoe with barely concealed contempt. "You'll need to wait outside during this procedure," he said firmly. "But the program outline says I'm supposed to observe all pre-flight procedures," Zoe countered, showing him the document Phillips had provided. "Not this one," Russell insisted. "Security protocols." Before Zoe could protest further, she found herself standing in the hallway outside the cockpit, the door firmly closed in her face. Confusion and humiliation washed over her. Through the thin door, she could hear Russell's muffled voice. "Can you believe they sent us a black girl? Last week's winner was a real pilot's son. This diversity push is going too far." First Officer Kendall's response was too quiet to hear, but Russell continued. "These affirmative action pics don't have what it takes. Flying is in the blood, not something you pick up from reading books." Zoe's cheeks burned with indignation. Her hand moved to her pocket, where her phone rested. With trembling fingers, she activated the voice recorder app and held it closer to the door, capturing Russell's continued disparaging remarks. "Waste of my time. Should be focusing on real candidates, not these charity cases." In that moment, standing alone in the sterile hallway, Zoe made a decision. She would not be diminished. She would not be erased. And she would certainly not wait quietly outside while her dreams were dismissed by a man who judged her by her skin color rather than her knowledge. With Captain Russell's words still burning in her ears, Zoe found herself wandering through corridors she probably shouldn't have accessed. Her badge, a temporary visitor pass, somehow hadn't triggered any security alerts as she pushed through a door marked, "Authorized personnel only." Perhaps in the busy morning rush, security protocols were more relaxed than they should have been. The maintenance hangar sprawled before her, a cavernous space filled with tools, equipment, and the imposing presence of aircraft in various states of repair. The familiar smell of jet fuel and machine oil reminded her of weekends spent with her father in his workshop, taking apart and reassembling small engines just for the joy of understanding how they worked. Zoe knew she should return to the designated waiting area, but the hurt and anger propelled her forward. She wasn't just some diversity pick, she had earned her place in that cockpit with knowledge and passion that few teenagers could match. As she moved deeper into the hangar, voices echoed from beneath the wing of a Transamerican Boeing 737, the very aircraft she was supposed to be shadowing that day. Ducking behind a large toolbox, she observed two mechanics working with unusual haste. "This isn't right, and you know it," said the older mechanic, whose name badge identified him as Luis Ramirez, maintenance chief. His weathered face was creased with concern as he inspected what appeared to be a hydraulic component. "Orders from above, Luis," replied the younger mechanic. "Flight 1382 needs to depart on schedule. The replacement part won't arrive until tomorrow. The backup system isn't rated for this kind of strain," Luis argued. "We need to ground this aircraft until the primary system is properly repaired. Thompson says it'll hold for one more flight. Sign it off, or he'll find someone who will." Zoe's pulse quickened. Thompson, that would be Garrett Thompson, VP of Operations, whose name she'd memorized during her research on Transamerican's leadership structure. "I've got 26 years of experience," Luis said firmly. "This patch job won't hold under pressure." The younger mechanic lowered his voice. "Look, either sign off or start updating your resume. Your choice." As the mechanics continued their tense exchange, Zoe studied the component they were working on. Recognition dawned immediately. It was a hydraulic actuator for the landing gear system. Her father's textbook had an entire chapter on these systems, complete with his detailed notes in the margins about failure points and proper maintenance protocols. The patch job they were implementing involved a temporary seal that, according to her father's notes, was only approved for ferry flights, moving an aircraft without passengers for maintenance purposes. Using it for a commercial flight with passengers was dangerous at best, catastrophic at worst. Zoe's heart raced as the mechanics moved away, leaving the component partially assembled. She crept closer, needing to confirm her suspicions. The serial number and maintenance tag confirmed everything. This was a critical safety component being improperly repaired to keep the flight on schedule. She pulled out her phone, intending to document the violation, when a voice called out from behind. "Hey! You can't be in here." Startled, Zoe dropped her phone. It clattered across the concrete floor, the screen shattering on impact. As she lunged to retrieve it, her hand came down on the broken glass, slicing her palm. "Ow!" She cried out, blood welling from the cut as she clutched her damaged phone. The security officer who had spotted her was already radioing for backup. "I've got an unauthorized individual in Hangar B, young female, appears to be tampering with aircraft." "I wasn't tampering," Zoe protested, cradling her bleeding hand. "I'm with the Future Flyers program. There's a safety violation on this aircraft that needs to be reported." The officer's expression made it clear he didn't believe her. Within minutes, Wesley Phillips and Captain Russell arrived, along with additional security personnel. "What is the meaning of this?" Russell demanded, his face flushed with anger. "This area is strictly off-limits." "Captain, I saw mechanics installing a temporary seal on the landing gear hydraulic system," Zoe explained urgently. "They're using a ferry flight-only component for a passenger flight. It's not safe." Russell's expression shifted from anger to condescension. "And you're a qualified aircraft mechanic now, too?" "No, but my father was an aerospace engineer. I recognize the component from his textbooks. It's a violation of FAA regulations too. This is precisely why uninformed civilians don't belong in secure areas," Russell cut her off, turning to Phillips. "This program is a liability. She needs to be removed immediately." "I'm not uninformed," Zoe insisted, her voice rising. "Check the maintenance log. Verify the part number. Lives are at stake." Phillips looked uncomfortable but nodded to security. "Please escort Ms. Washington from the premises." "I'm sorry, but trespassing in restricted areas is grounds for immediate termination of your shadowing opportunity." As security took her arm, Zoe clutched her bleeding hand to her chest, glass shards from her phone still embedded in her palm. The pain was sharp, but it was nothing compared to the ache of injustice burning in her chest. "You're making a mistake," she said, looking directly at Phillips. "People could die if that plane takes off." For a brief moment, doubt flickered across Phillips' face. But then Captain Russell stepped forward. "This kind of dramatic attention-seeking is exactly what I expected," he said dismissively. "Get her out of here." As they led her away, Zoe glanced back at the aircraft, at the passengers who would soon board, unaware of the danger lurking in its critical systems. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, "Knowledge is power, but courage gives it wings." With blood dripping from her palm and determination hardening in her heart, Zoe knew she wouldn't, be silenced. "I'm not leaving until someone checks that hydraulic system," Zoe declared, planting her feet firmly as security attempted to guide her toward the exit. The cut on her palm throbbed, droplets of blood staining the pristine airport floor tiles. "Miss, please don't make this more difficult," the security officer said, his tone caught between sympathy and frustration. PR Director Wesley Phillips pinched the bridge of his nose, clearly calculating the public relations implications of forcibly removing a bleeding teenage girl from the premises. "Zoe, I understand you're upset about being excluded from certain procedures, but trespassing and making unfounded accusations about aircraft safety isn't the answer." "Unfounded?" Zoe's voice rose with indignation. "I know what I saw. The maintenance chief himself said it wasn't safe." Captain Russell stepped forward, his imposing figure deliberately invading Zoe's personal space. "This charade has gone on long enough. Either leave voluntarily, or we'll have you removed and charged with trespassing in a secure area." The threat hung in the air, but Zoe stood her ground, even as tears of frustration threatened to spill. She thought of all the passengers who would board that plane, trusting their lives to people who valued schedules over safety. "Is everything all right here?" A new voice entered the fray. First Officer Brady Kendall had appeared in the corridor, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he noticed Zoe's bleeding hand. "Everything's fine," Captain Russell responded tersely. "Our guest was just leaving." "I'm not leaving," Zoe insisted, turning her attention to Kendall. "First Officer Kendall, they're installing an unapproved hydraulic seal on the landing gear system. It's only rated for ferry flights, not passenger service. Please, just check the maintenance log." Russell scoffed. "She wandered into a restricted area and now thinks she's an FAA inspector. Kendall, we have a flight to prepare." But something in Zoe's desperate plea had caught Kendall's attention. He studied her face carefully, then looked at her bleeding hand. "How did you get hurt?" "My phone broke when security startled me. I cut myself on the glass," Zoe explained, grateful for the momentary reprieve from dismissal. "I was trying to document the violation." Kendall turned to Phillips. "Can we get her some first aid?" "Of course," Phillips nodded, perhaps relieved by the change of focus. "This is a waste of valuable pre-flight time," Russell objected, checking his watch pointedly. "It'll take 2 minutes," Kendall countered, then addressed Zoe directly. "What specifically did you see that concerned you?" As a nearby attendant bandaged her hand, Zoe detailed her observations with precision, using technical terminology that clearly surprised Russell. The serial number on the component was TX-470B, which is explicitly labeled "not for commercial flight operations" in the maintenance manual. The mechanics were arguing about it, the chief didn't want to sign off. A flicker of recognition crossed Kendall's features. He'd been a maintenance officer in the Air Force before joining Transamerican. "That's a temporary seal assembly. If that's what they're using." He didn't finish the sentence, but his expression had grown serious. "This is absurd," Russell interjected. "You're taking the word of a trespassing teenager over our certified maintenance team." "I'm just saying it warrants checking, Howard," Kendall replied firmly. "If she's wrong, we've lost 5 minutes. If she's right." Again, he left the implications hanging. "Check the damn logs if it'll end this circus," Russell finally conceded. "But she's still being removed from the program." Kendall nodded and stepped away to make a call. Zoe felt a small surge of hope, quickly dampened when she saw 3 men in expensive suits approaching, one of whom she recognized from her research as Garrett Thompson, VP of Operations. "What's the hold-up, Russell?" Thompson demanded. "We've got a full flight and a tight schedule." Phillips quickly explained the situation, carefully framing it as a misunderstanding with our contest winner. Thompson's gaze fell on Zoe, cold and calculating. "Young lady, I understand your enthusiasm for aviation, but making false accusations about our safety protocols is serious business." "They're not false," Zoe maintained, meeting his stare. "And I think you know that, sir." Thompson's expression hardened. "I've personally reviewed all maintenance logs this morning. Everything is in compliance with FAA regulations." The calculated lie confirmed Zoe's suspicions. This wasn't just one mechanic cutting corners, this was systemic. "Then you won't mind if First Officer Kendall verifies that," she challenged. Before Thompson could respond, Kendall returned, his expression grim. "I just spoke with maintenance. There seems to be some discrepancy in the logs." Thompson's face darkened. "Whatever discrepancy exists, I'm sure it's minor and can be addressed after we get this flight airborne. We have a schedule to maintain." "A schedule isn't worth lives," Zoe said quietly. Thompson turned to her, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "You've caused quite enough trouble for one day. Security will escort you out now." As security moved to take her arm again, Zoe pulled out her final card. "I recorded Captain Russell's discriminatory comments. I have proof he excluded me from the cockpit because of my race, not security protocols." The statement froze everyone in place. Russell's face drained of color. "That's a serious accusation," Phillips said carefully. It's the truth, Zoe replied. And I'm prepared to share it with every news outlet in Atlanta if that plane takes off without a proper safety inspection. The standoff was interrupted by Zoe's phone ringing, her mother, likely checking how her big day was going. I need to take this, she said, stepping back. Mom. Can you come to the airport? And, can you bring Grandma? Let me know if you're with Zoe in this situation. Comment number 1 if you think she's doing the right thing standing up to airline executives, or number 2 if you think she should have just left when asked. Would you have had the courage to speak up like Zoe did? Hit that like button if you believe safety should always come before profit, and subscribe to hear more stories about brave individuals fighting injustice. Now, what do you think will happen when Zoe's family arrives? Will First Officer Kendall stand with her against his superior? And just how deep does this safety violation scandal go? The situation is about to intensify. While waiting for her family to arrive, Zoe sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair in what Phillips euphemistically called a hospitality room, but was clearly a security holding area. Her bandaged hand throbbed in rhythm with her racing thoughts as she tried to formulate a plan. Outside the frosted glass door, she could hear heated conversations between airline officials, though the words were indistinct. First Officer Brady Kendall had disappeared 20 minutes earlier, promising to look into her claims about the maintenance log. Zoe checked her damaged phone. The screen was shattered, but it still functioned enough to show that her recording of Captain Russell's discriminatory comments had saved successfully. Small victories, she thought, though it provided little comfort given the larger battle ahead. A soft knock preceded Kendall's return. His expression was guarded as he entered and closed the door behind him. I checked the maintenance logs, he said in a low voice, taking the seat across from her. And then I physically inspected the component myself. Zoe held her breath, searching his face for clues. You were right, he admitted. They installed a TX-470B temporary seal assembly, which is explicitly not rated for commercial passenger flights. Vindication should have felt sweeter, but all Zoe felt was cold dread. So what happens now? Will they ground the aircraft? Kendall's hesitation told her everything. Thompson is pushing to proceed with boarding. He's claiming the component exceeds minimum safety requirements despite its classification. That's not how aviation safety works. Zoe protested. Either a component is rated for commercial passenger service or it isn't. There's no gray area. I know, Kendall agreed. I've refused to fly the aircraft in its current condition. Thank you, Zoe said, relief washing over her. At least one person with authority was taking this seriously. Captain Russell is attempting to proceed with another first officer, Kendall continued, shattering her momentary relief. Thompson is backing him. Zoe's phone buzzed, a text from her mother, at employee entrance with Grandma. Security won't let us in. What's happening? Before she could respond, the door opened again, revealing PR Director Wesley Phillips, now accompanied by a woman Zoe didn't recognize. Zoe, this is Patricia Alvarez from Transamerican's legal department, Phillips said, his professional smile strained. Ms. Washington, Alvarez began without preamble, Transamerican Airlines takes all safety concerns and discrimination allegations extremely seriously. We'd like to offer you an opportunity to resolve this situation amicably. Zoe recognized a settlement attempt when she heard one. You mean you want me to sign something and go away quietly? Alvarez's smile didn't reach her eyes. We're prepared to offer you an upgraded future flyers experience at a later date, along with a substantial scholarship contribution and travel vouchers. In exchange, we'd ask you to sign a standard non-disclosure agreement regarding today's misunderstandings. While passengers board an unsafe aircraft? Zoe challenged. No thank you. Phillips interjected, I assure you, the aircraft's safety is being thoroughly evaluated as we speak. By the same executives who pressured mechanics to cut corners in the first place. Zoe countered. I want independent verification. And I want my family allowed in immediately. As if on cue, raised voices echoed from the corridor, one of them unmistakably her grandmother Alma's. That child is my granddaughter, and if you don't let me see her this instant, I'm calling every news station in Atlanta. Phillips winced and hurried to the door, where Alma Washington, all 5 feet 2 inches of her, was giving security officers a piece of her mind, with Kayla standing firmly beside her. Let them in, Phillips instructed security, his careful facade of control beginning to crack. Alma rushed to Zoe, gasping at the sight of her bandaged hand. Baby, what happened to you? As Zoe quickly explained the situation, Kayla's nurse training kicked in. She examined the bandage, then fixed Phillips with a withering stare. Has she received proper medical attention? There could be glass fragments still embedded in the wound. We offered medical assistance, Phillips assured her. A first aid kit isn't medical assistance, Kayla countered. Their exchange was interrupted by a knock at the door. A young woman in a flight attendant uniform peeked in cautiously. Excuse me, she said. I'm Jasmine Carter, senior flight attendant for Flight 1382. Phillips looked increasingly flustered. Ms. Carter, this is a private meeting. I know, sir, but... Jasmine hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. I overheard what happened with Captain Russell, and I wanted to confirm that Ms. Washington's account is accurate. He's made similar comments about other minority staff members. The room fell silent. Jasmine had just provided independent corroboration of Zoe's discrimination claim, significantly strengthening her position. Additionally, Jasmine continued, gaining confidence, there's growing concern among the cabin crew about rushing this flight. Rumors about maintenance issues are spreading. Phillips and Alvarez exchanged alarmed glances. The situation was spiraling beyond their control. Is there something wrong with the plane my grandbaby was supposed to be on? Alma demanded. Before Phillips could formulate a response, First Officer Kendall spoke up. Yes, ma'am, there is. And your granddaughter was the only one brave enough to call it out. Kendall's phone buzzed. After checking it, his expression grew even more serious. The mechanics union representative has just arrived at the gate. Someone anonymously reported the safety violation. Phillips looked at Zoe suspiciously, but she shook her head. She hadn't contacted anyone outside the airport. It wasn't me, Kendall confirmed. But I know who it was. Floyd Jenkins, a veteran mechanic who's been reporting safety shortcuts for months without action. The revelation that this wasn't an isolated incident changed the atmosphere in the room dramatically. This wasn't just about one flight or one instance of discrimination, it was a pattern of corporate negligence. Ms. Washington, Alvarez said, her tone now significantly less confident, perhaps we should discuss a more comprehensive resolution. The only resolution I'm interested in is making sure that plane doesn't fly until it's properly repaired, Zoe stated firmly. And ensuring Captain Russell is held accountable for his discriminatory behavior. Alma placed a supportive hand on Zoe's shoulder. That's my girl. Philip's phone rang. His face paled as he listened to the caller. Yes, sir. I understand. Right away. He ended the call and addressed the room. That was the terminal manager. Passengers are noticing the delay, and some are filming the mechanics union representatives arguing with our staff at the gate. It's becoming a situation. It became a situation the moment you prioritized profits over safety and allowed racial discrimination, Kayla said sharply. The FAA has been notified, Kendall added. They're sending inspectors. Phillips looked defeated. Ms. Washington, what would you like us to do? Zoe considered for a moment. First, ground that aircraft until it's properly repaired and independently certified. Second, launch a full investigation into Captain Russell's discriminatory practices. Third, review all maintenance logs for the past year to identify any other safety shortcuts. That's extensive, Phillips hedged. So is the potential loss of human life, Zoe countered. The door opened again, revealing a grim-faced Garrett Thompson. Phillips, this situation is completely out of hand. There are passengers posting on social media, news vans arriving outside, and now the FAA is involved. He noticed Zoe and her family, and his expression darkened further. This could have been handled quietly. No, sir, Zoe said, rising to her feet. Safety violations and discrimination should never be handled quietly. Thompson's cold mask slipped, revealing the fury beneath. You have no idea what you've done. I believe she just saved lives, Kendall interjected, standing protectively near Zoe and her family. Outside, the announcement system crackled to life. Attention passengers of Transamerican Flight 1382 to Chicago. Due to maintenance requirements, your flight has been delayed. We apologize for the inconvenience and will provide updates as they become available. It was small victory, but an important one. The unsafe plane would not be flying today. What no one in the room yet realized was that this was just the beginning. As passengers shared videos and news crews gathered, the story of how a 16-year-old black girl stood up to corporate giants to protect public safety was about to captivate the nation. The scene at Gate C-12 descended into controlled chaos as Transamerican Airline staff struggled to manage increasingly agitated passengers. The vague, maintenance delay, announcement had satisfied some, but others, particularly those with connecting flights, demanded more information. Zoe, escorted by her mother and grandmother, along with First Officer Kendall and Flight Attendant Jasmine Carter, approached the gate area just as Garrett Thompson was attempting to placate the crowd. I assure you, this is merely a precautionary measure, Thompson was saying, his corporate smile firmly in place. We anticipate resolving this matter shortly. That's not true, Zoe said, loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. The aircraft has an improperly installed safety component that doesn't meet FAA regulations for passenger flights. Heads turned. Phones raised to record. Thompson's smile froze as he registered Zoe's presence. Young lady, he said through gritted teeth, making false statements about aircraft safety is not only irresponsible but potentially illegal. It's not false, First Officer Kendall stepped forward. As the assigned first officer for this flight, I verified Ms. Washington's concerns and refused to fly the aircraft in its current condition. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A uniformed pilot publicly confirming safety issues was impossible to dismiss. Everyone, please. Thompson raised his voice. There is absolutely no danger. We're simply addressing a minor documentation discrepancy. A ferry flight-only hydraulic seal on landing gear is not a documentation discrepancy, Zoe countered, her clear voice carrying across the gate area. It's a critical safety violation that could result in landing gear failure. The word failure triggered immediate reaction among passengers. Several began calling to cancel their tickets, while others started recording and live streaming the confrontation. Security. Thompson called. Remove this unauthorized individual from the gate area immediately. Two security officers approached, but hesitated when they saw Kendall's uniform and the determination on the faces of Zoe's family. You might want to reconsider, Kayla said firmly. My daughter has evidence of both safety violations and racial discrimination by your staff. Forcibly removing her would make an excellent lead story on the evening news. She nodded toward the terminal entrance, where two people with professional camera equipment were already filming. Thompson's face contorted with rage. This is private property. You can't, actually, as a public commercial airport receiving federal funding, the terminal areas are considered public forums under First Amendment jurisprudence, came a new voice. A distinguished older man with salt and pepper hair approached. Floyd Jenkins, Mechanics Union representative. And I've just received confirmation from 3 separate inspectors that the hydraulic component in question is indeed improperly installed and not rated for commercial passenger service. The situation was spiraling beyond Transamerican's control. Passengers were abandoning the gate, demanding refunds, and sharing the unfolding drama on social media. Airport staff from other airlines watched with barely concealed curiosity. Thompson's phone rang. His expression shifted from anger to alarm as he listened. "Yes, sir. I understand. Immediately, sir." He ended the call and nodded to Phillips, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. "Ladies and gentlemen," Phillips announced, stepping to the gate desk microphone, "Transamerican Airlines regrets to inform you that Flight 1382 has been cancelled due to maintenance requirements. All passengers will be rebooked on later flights or alternative carriers. Please proceed to the customer service desk for assistance." A collective groan rose from the crowd, but it was tinged with relief rather than just frustration. Nobody wanted to board an aircraft with questionable safety. As Phillips made the announcement, Zoe noticed Captain Russell attempting to slip away through a service door. "There he goes," she said to Kendall. "The man who told me to wait outside because of my skin color." Kendall nodded grimly. "He won't get far. The chief pilot is already waiting to speak with him." A commotion at the security checkpoint drew everyone's attention. A group of official-looking individuals with FAA credentials were being expedited through. Their expressions suggested this was no routine inspection. "Thompson." One of them called out. "Federal Aviation Administration. We need to speak with you immediately regarding allegations of safety protocol violations." Thompson's complexion paled to an ashen gray. "This is all a misunderstanding," he began, but the FAA official cut him off. "We have reports of systematic pressure on maintenance personnel to sign off on non-compliant repairs. These are serious allegations that could constitute criminal negligence." As Thompson was led away for questioning, Zoe felt a strange mixture of vindication and sadness. She hadn't wanted to bring down an airline, she'd simply wanted to be treated fairly and ensure passenger safety. "You did the right thing," Kendall told her quietly. "It took courage." "I was just trying to honor what my dad taught me," Zoe replied, her voice thick with emotion. Nearby, a commotion erupted as Luis Ramirez, the maintenance chief, confronted one of Thompson's deputies. "For months I've been filing reports about corner cutting." His voice carried across the terminal. "How many other aircraft have unauthorized components? How many other flights have been at risk?" The implications of his question sent a chill through everyone within earshot. This wasn't just about Flight 1382. It was potentially about every Transamerican aircraft in service. Jasmine, who had been checking her phone, looked up with wide eyes. "It's trending on Twitter. #Transamerican shutdown is going viral. There are videos from at least 12 different passengers." Phillips, who had overheard, looked like he might faint. "The CEO is on his way from corporate headquarters," he said to no one in particular. "Board members are calling in." Meanwhile, Alma had taken charge in her inimitable way, making sure Zoe's hand received proper medical attention from paramedics who had responded to an unrelated call nearby. "My grandbaby stands up to a whole airline, the least we can do is make sure there's no glass left in her palm," she declared. As a paramedic cleaned and properly bandaged Zoe's cut, another Transamerican executive approached, Senior Vice President of Operations, Diana Winters. Unlike Thompson, her concern appeared genuine. "Ms. Washington," she said, "I want to personally apologize for your experience today. What happened was inexcusable on multiple levels." Zoe studied the woman carefully before responding. "It's not me you should be apologizing to. It's every passenger who's flown on aircraft with questionable repairs, and every employee who's faced discrimination like I did." Winters nodded soberly. "You're absolutely right. And I promise you, there will be a full investigation with real consequences." She handed Zoe her business card. "When you're ready, I'd like to hear more about your experience, especially regarding Captain Russell." As Winters walked away to deal with the growing crisis, Zoe noticed something remarkable happening throughout the terminal. Airport staff from other airlines were approaching her, quietly offering words of support and thanks. A Southwest pilot gave her a respectful nod. A Delta flight attendant whispered, "We've all seen this kind of thing. Thank you for speaking up." The magnitude of what she'd done was beginning to sink in. What had started with a simple dream of shadowing pilots for a day had transformed into something much larger, a moment of reckoning for an entire airline, and perhaps the industry itself. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Zoe could see news vans gathering. Her phone was buzzing constantly with notifications as the story spread. And in the distance, a Transamerican plane sat empty at the gate. Grounded not by mechanical failure, but by the courage of a 16-year-old girl who refused to wait outside. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Transamerican's initial attempt to contain the situation had failed spectacularly, with #Transamerican shutdown and #ZoeStan trending nationally. As emergency inspections were ordered for the entire Transamerican fleet, the ripple effects cascaded through the air travel system nationwide. Zoe and her family had been moved to a private conference room, away from the media circus forming in the terminal. First Officer Kendall and Flight Attendant Jasmine Carter had stayed with them, providing both moral support and damning insider information about the airline's practices. "It's worse than just Flight 1382, Kendall explained, showing them internal communications he'd accessed on his company tablet. "There's a pattern of rushed maintenance and documentation issues going back at least 8 months. That's when the new cost-cutting initiative started," Jasmine added. After Thompson was brought in from United to streamline operations. A knock at the door revealed Floyd Jenkins, the mechanics union representative, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in an FAA jacket. "Ms. Washington. I'm Sofia Rodriguez, Federal Aviation Administration Chief Inspector," the woman introduced herself. "I'd like to personally thank you for bringing this situation to light. Our preliminary inspection has confirmed everything you reported about the hydraulic seal assembly." "It wasn't just me," Zoe said modestly. "Mr. Ramirez tried to stop it, and First Officer Kendall refused to fly the plane." "True," Rodriguez acknowledged, "but according to multiple witnesses, nothing would have happened without your persistence. You demonstrated remarkable technical knowledge for someone your age." "My father taught me," Zoe said quietly. "He was an aerospace engineer." "Andre Washington?" Rodriguez asked, surprise evident in her voice. Zoe nodded, equally surprised. "You knew him?" "By reputation," Rodriguez clarified. His research on hydraulic system redundancies influenced several FAA safety recommendations. He was highly respected in the industry. The connection felt like a sign, her father's legacy living on through her actions today. Kayla squeezed Zoe's hand, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "There's more," Floyd Jenkins said, his weathered face grim. "The emergency inspections have already found 2 other aircraft with similarly unauthorized components. And our union members are coming forward with dozens of reports of being pressured to cut corners and rush inspections." "Thompson created a culture of fear," Kendall added. "Anyone who raised safety concerns was labeled a problem employee and sidelined." Rodriguez nodded. "We're opening a comprehensive investigation. This goes beyond regulatory violations into potential criminal negligence." Another knock interrupted them. Wesley Phillips entered, looking like he'd aged 10 years since morning. "The CEO has arrived and would like to speak with Ms. Washington and her family." "Absolutely not," Kayla said immediately. "My daughter has been through enough today." "I understand your concern," Phillips said, "but Jackson Hayes is taking this situation extremely seriously. He flew in from New York specifically to address this personally." Before Kayla could refuse again, Zoe spoke up. "I'll talk to him." "Zoe, you don't have to," her grandmother cautioned. "I know, Grandma. But if he's actually listening now, maybe something good can come from all this." Minutes later, Transamerican CEO Jackson Hayes entered the room. Unlike Thompson's slick corporate demeanor, Hayes appeared genuinely shaken. He introduced himself without pretense and asked permission to sit. "Ms. Washington, I want to start by offering my sincere apology for what you experienced today," he began. "Both the discrimination you faced and the way your safety concerns were dismissed are completely unacceptable and counter to everything this airline should stand for." His candor was unexpected. Zoe studied him carefully before responding. "Thank you, but I'm not the only one affected. What about all the passengers who've been flying on improperly maintained aircraft? And the employees who faced discrimination like I did?" Hayes nodded soberly. "You're absolutely right. The issues you've exposed appear to be systemic, and addressing them will require significant changes throughout the organization." He took a deep breath. "As of 30 minutes ago, Garrett Thompson has been suspended pending investigation. Captain Howard Russell has been grounded and will face disciplinary proceedings." It was a start, but Zoe pressed further. "And the safety violations?" "We've grounded our entire fleet for emergency inspections," Hayes confirmed. "So far, we've found evidence of similar maintenance irregularities on 7 aircraft. The FAA is conducting a full audit, and we're cooperating fully." Rodriguez nodded in confirmation. Mr. Hayes has been transparent about the situation since arriving. As they were speaking, Jasmine's phone buzzed. Her eyes widened as she read the message. "You might want to see this," she said, passing her phone to Zoe. It was a news article that had just been published online, Trans-American Airlines Under Fire, History of Discrimination Complaints Against Captain Exposed. Someone had leaked Russell's personnel file to the media, revealing multiple complaints from minority employees and passengers over the years. All quietly resolved with settlements and non-disclosure agreements. "I didn't know," Hayes said, reading over Zoe's shoulder. This information was evidently contained within confidential HR files that Thompson oversaw. "Convenient," Kayla remarked skeptically. Hayes didn't deny it. "There will be a full, independent investigation into our HR practices as well. The culture that allowed this to happen must change." The door opened again, and a young aide whispered something to Phillips, whose eyes widened. He quickly switched on the conference room's television to a news channel. On screen, a reporter stood outside the airport, where 16-year-old Zoe Washington, an essay contest winner who was supposed to be shadowing pilots today, instead uncovered serious safety violations and experienced racial discrimination. Her actions have potentially saved countless lives and exposed a culture of corner-cutting at one of America's largest airlines. The camera cut to clips from passenger videos showing Zoe standing up to Thompson at the gate, followed by interviews with passengers praising her courage. "This young lady is a hero," one passenger stated emphatically. "She stood up when nobody else would." The report continued. The FAA has ordered emergency inspections of all Trans-American aircraft, and sources tell us at least 7 have already been found with similar safety violations. Meanwhile, Senator Maya Daniels, a former commercial pilot herself, has called for congressional hearings on airline safety oversight. The screen showed Senator Daniels at a hastily arranged press conference. "What happened today raises serious questions about the effectiveness of our current regulatory framework. When it takes a 16-year-old girl to expose these violations, the system is fundamentally broken." As the report concluded, the room fell silent. The national implications of what had begun as a simple shadowing opportunity were becoming clear. "My legal team is already preparing settlement offers," Hayes finally said. "We're not interested in money," Kayla stated firmly. "I understand," Hayes nodded. "But there will need to be some form of resolution. Perhaps we can discuss how Trans-American might turn this into an opportunity for positive change in the industry." Zoe considered this. "I'd want to see real reforms. Stronger whistleblower protections for employees reporting safety concerns. A transparent anti-discrimination policy with actual consequences. And maybe, a scholarship program for minority students interested in aviation careers." Hayes looked at her with new respect. "Those are excellent suggestions. Would you be willing to help shape such initiatives?" Before Zoe could respond, she noticed her grandmother dabbing at her eyes. "Grandma? Are you okay?" Alma smiled through her tears. "Just thinking how proud your father would be right now. He always said you'd fly higher than he ever did. I don't think he meant quite like this, but here you are, soaring." For the first time since the morning's events began, Zoe felt the emotional weight lift slightly. Whatever came next. Media attention, legal proceedings, airline reforms, she'd faced the ultimate test of her character and stayed true to her father's legacy. Outside the conference room windows, as evening fell over Atlanta International Airport, dozens of Transamerican aircraft sat empty at their gates, grounded by the courage of a girl who refused to wait outside. 3 days after the incident that had now become known nationally as the Transamerican shutdown, Zoe Washington found herself in a situation she'd never imagined, sitting at a massive oak conference table in Transamerican's corporate headquarters, facing the airline's entire executive leadership team and board of directors. The past 72 hours had been a whirlwind. The story had exploded across traditional and social media, with Zoe being hailed as everything from a teenage whistleblower to a civil rights hero. Her phone had been ringing constantly with interview requests from major networks, and a hashtag #WaitOutside, had become a rallying cry for both aviation safety advocates and anti-discrimination activists. Now, dressed in a new navy blue suit her mother had insisted on buying for the occasion, "If you're going to face down corporate America, you're going to look the part," Zoe sat flanked by her family and their newly acquired legal representation, Patricia Foster, a formidable attorney specializing in both discrimination and corporate accountability cases. Across the table sat CEO Jackson Hayes, along with the remaining executive team and board members. Notably absent were Garrett Thompson and several other executives who had been suspended pending investigation. Captain Howard Russell was also absent, having been placed on administrative leave. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Hayes began, his tone respectful. "As I mentioned at the airport, we want to address what happened properly and transparently." "Before we proceed," Foster interjected, "I want to be clear that my clients are not interested in being silenced with settlement money and NDAs. Ms. Washington's primary concern remains passenger safety and addressing the discriminatory culture at Transamerican." Hayes nodded. "Understood. That's precisely why we've invited Ms. Washington here today, not to silence her, but to hear her perspective on how we can do better." Zoe studied the faces around the table. Some appeared genuinely contrite, while others seemed merely concerned with damage control. The company had lost nearly 30% of its stock value in 3 days, and cancellations were mounting as passengers booked away from Transamerican. "I appreciate that," Zoe said carefully. "But I'm curious why it took a PR disaster for these concerns to be taken seriously. From what I've learned, mechanics and other employees have been reporting safety shortcuts for months." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, an older board member spoke up. "That's a fair question, young lady. The truth is, we failed in our oversight responsibilities. We trusted executives who prioritized metrics over safety and ethics, and we didn't dig deeply enough into how those metrics were being achieved." Hayes added, "The preliminary findings of our internal investigation confirm that Mr. Thompson created a reporting structure that essentially filtered out negative information before it reached the executive committee or board level." "That's convenient," Kayla commented skeptically. "Blame everything on the executives who've been suspended." "Mom," Zoe touched her mother's arm gently before addressing the room. "The issue isn't just individual bad actors. It's the system that rewarded cutting corners and silencing concerns. And it's the culture that made Captain Russell comfortable making racist comments because he assumed there would be no consequences." Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You're absolutely right," Hayes acknowledged. "Which is why we've asked you here. Not just to apologize or make amends, but to help us understand how to change that system and culture." The door opened, and Wesley Phillips entered with a familiar face. Luis Ramirez, the maintenance chief who had initially objected to the improper repair. Sorry we're late, Phillips said. Mr. Ramirez was just meeting with the FAA investigators. Ramirez nodded respectfully to Zoe as he took a seat. They confirmed everything you reported. And much more, unfortunately. How much more? Zoe asked. The FAA has now identified 23 aircraft in our fleet with maintenance irregularities, Hayes answered grimly. Some minor, some not so minor. The number sent a chill through the room. 23 aircraft that had been carrying passengers despite safety issues. There's more, Ramirez added. Multiple mechanics have now come forward with documentation showing they were pressured to sign off on repairs they weren't comfortable with. Some were threatened with termination if they didn't comply. And what about the discrimination issues? Attorney Foster pressed. Ms. Washington's experience wasn't isolated, was it? Hayes exchanged glances with the board chairman before responding. No, it wasn't. Once we began investigating Captain Russell, we found a pattern of complaints that had been systematically downplayed or resolved with confidential settlements. And he's not the only one with such a record. Which brings us to why we're really here, the board chairman said. Ms. Washington, Transamerican is at a crossroads. We can either try to weather this storm with traditional crisis management. Or we can use this moment to fundamentally transform our company. Zoe considered this. And you want my input on that transformation? Yes, Hayes confirmed. Your perspective as both a victim of discrimination and someone with clearly impressive technical knowledge would be invaluable. Before Zoe could respond, the door burst open. A visibly agitated PR executive rushed in and whispered urgently to Phillips, who paled visibly. What is it? Hayes demanded. Phillips swallowed hard. Sir, CNN is about to air an interview with Jennifer Martinez, a former Transamerican flight attendant. She's alleging that she was fired after reporting Captain Russell for discrimination last year. And she has emails showing that Thompson personally intervened to protect Russell. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. Hayes quickly had an assistant turn on the large screen on the wall, where the CNN broadcast was already featuring Martinez's tearful testimony. Told me that as a Latina, I should be grateful to even have the job. When I reported it, I was suddenly receiving negative performance reviews, and within 3 months, I was terminated for attitude problems. The interviewer asked, and you believe this was retaliation for reporting discrimination? I know it was, Martinez replied firmly. And I have the emails to prove it. The VP of Operations, Garrett Thompson, wrote to my supervisor that I needed to be managed out because I was causing problems for a valuable pilot. As the interview continued, revealing more damning details, Zoe watched the executives' reactions closely. Their shock seemed genuine, suggesting that perhaps Hayes and the board truly had been kept in the dark about the extent of the problems. When the segment ended, Hayes turned to Zoe and her family with new urgency in his voice. This situation is clearly even worse than we initially understood. Ms. Washington, we need to take decisive action, and quickly. What kind of action? Zoe asked. A complete overhaul of our safety compliance systems. A zero-tolerance policy for discrimination with clear reporting channels that bypass normal management structures. New training programs at every level. And public accountability measures. Foster leaned forward. And who exactly would oversee these changes to ensure they're meaningful and not just window dressing? We'd like to establish an independent oversight committee, the board chairman explained. With representatives from safety experts, civil rights organizations, employee unions, and... He looked directly at Zoe, if you'd be willing, you. Zoe blinked in surprise. Me? I'm 16. Exactly, Hayes said. You've demonstrated more integrity and courage than executives with decades of experience. Your perspective would be invaluable, especially as we develop programs to encourage more young people of color to enter aviation careers. It was a stunning proposal, offering a high school student a role in reshaping a major corporation. But as Zoe considered it, she realized it wasn't as crazy as it first seemed. Her father had always told her that real change rarely came from within broken systems. It required outside perspectives and fresh eyes. "I'd need to finish my education first," Zoe said thoughtfully. "And any role I took would have to be substantive, not just for PR purposes." "Of course," Hayes agreed quickly. "We're thinking of a special advisory position, initially working with our diversity initiatives and safety compliance teams during school breaks and summers, with the potential for a more formal role when you're older, if you're interested." "And what about Captain Russell and the others responsible?" Kayla asked pointedly. "Captain Russell's employment has been terminated, effective immediately," Hayes stated firmly. "We're cooperating fully with federal investigations into both the safety violations and discrimination allegations, which may result in criminal charges for some executives. And we're establishing a fund to compensate employees who experience discrimination or retaliation." As the discussion continued, detailing more specific reforms and actions, Zoe found herself thinking about how drastically her life had changed in just a few days. What had begun as a simple desire to learn about flying had transformed into something much larger, a catalyst for systemic change in an entire industry. The meeting concluded with a framework agreement for moving forward. One that would involve Zoe in shaping Transamerican's reforms while ensuring her education remained her priority. As they prepared to leave, Hayes approached Zoe privately. "There's one more thing," he said, handing her an envelope. "We'd like to establish a scholarship in your father's name, the Andre Washington Memorial Scholarship for Excellence in Aviation. For minority students pursuing careers in the field. We'd like your input on the criteria." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes as she accepted the envelope. It was the most meaningful acknowledgement they could have offered, not just recognizing her actions, but honoring the man whose teachings had guided those actions. As Zoe and her family departed corporate headquarters, reporters waited outside. One called out, "Zoe, how does it feel to have changed an entire airline at 16? Zoe paused, considering the question carefully before answering. "It's not about me. It's about standing up for what's right, no matter who you are or how young you might be. My father taught me that knowledge is power, but courage gives it wings. Today, I'm just trying to live by those words." The quote would be featured in newspapers across the country the following day, inspiring countless young people to find their own voices against injustice. The girl who'd been told to wait outside had instead opened doors for generations to come. 3 months after the day that changed her life forever, Zoe Washington stood at the podium in Transamerican Airlines' newly renovated training center, a building now named the Andre Washington Center for Excellence in Aviation. Before her sat an audience of airline executives, FAA officials, civil rights leaders, and most importantly to Zoe, a group of 20 high school students, the first recipients of the Andre Washington Memorial Scholarship. "When I was told to wait outside that day," Zoe began, her voice steady despite the emotion of the moment, "I never imagined it would lead to all of this. I was just a girl who loved aviation and wanted to be treated with the same respect given to everyone else." The past 3 months had been transformative, not just for Zoe, but for the entire aviation industry. Transamerican's very public reckoning had triggered similar internal reviews at airlines across the country, with the FAA implementing stricter oversight protocols for maintenance compliance and aircraft certification. "Today marks not an ending, but a beginning," Zoe continued. "These 20 brilliant young minds sitting before me represent the future of aviation, a future where no one is told to wait outside because of their race, gender, or background." The scholarship program was just one of many initiatives born from the crisis. Transamerican had emerged from its darkest chapter with a renewed commitment to both safety and inclusivity, implementing sweeping reforms that were already being hailed as a new industry standard. Garrett Thompson had been indicted on multiple federal charges related to the safety violations, facing up to 20 years in prison if convicted. Several other executives were awaiting trial for their roles in the scandal. Captain Howard Russell had not only lost his position but had been stripped of his pilot's license pending a full FAA investigation into his history of discrimination and safety violations. More surprisingly, Wesley Phillips had resigned from his PR position in protest over the company's initial handling of the incident, later becoming a key witness in the federal investigation. He'd recently accepted a position with a nonprofit focused on corporate accountability. First Officer Brady Kendall had been promoted to captain and now headed Transamerican's revamped pilot mentoring program, designed specifically to support women and minorities entering the profession. He sat in the front row now, nodding encouragingly as Zoe spoke. "My father used to say that flying isn't just about defying gravity, it's about rising above our limitations," Zoe continued. Today, Transamerican is rising above its past mistakes, creating a culture where safety is never compromised and every person is valued for their contributions, not judged by their appearance. In the audience, Zoe's mother Kayla and grandmother Alma watched with tear-filled eyes. Beside them sat Luis Ramirez, now heading the airline's newly established Maintenance Integrity Division, and Jasmine Carter, recently promoted to Chief of Cabin Crew Training. The changes weren't merely cosmetic. Transamerican had established an independent safety oversight board with real authority to ground aircraft and halt operations if violations were discovered. Their new anonymous reporting system had already identified and addressed dozens of potential safety issues before they became problems. And their zero-tolerance policy for discrimination had resulted in the termination of 17 employees at various levels who couldn't adapt to the new culture. This center, Zoe gestured to the building around them, represents more than just a training facility. It stands as a reminder that integrity cannot be compromised, that speaking truth to power requires courage, and that change often comes from unexpected places. As part of her settlement with Transamerican, Zoe had declined a massive financial payout, instead requesting the establishment of the scholarship program and the creation of this training center in her father's name. She'd also accepted a position on the airline's Youth Advisory Council, where she worked alongside industry professionals to develop programs encouraging minorities to pursue aviation careers. "3 months ago, I was just a contest winner with a dream of flying," Zoe said, her voice growing stronger. "Today, I stand before you as proof that one voice, even a young voice, can make a difference when it speaks the truth." What Zoe didn't mention in her speech was that she'd started flight lessons the previous month, working toward her private pilot's license with the full support of Transamerican. Every Saturday morning, she took to the skies in a small Cessna, her father's aviation textbook tucked beside her seat as she gradually accumulated flight hours. "The changes we've witnessed at Transamerican are just the beginning," Zoe continued. "The real work happens every day, in countless small decisions that prioritize human lives over profit margins and treat every person with dignity regardless of their background." As Zoe concluded her remarks and the audience rose in a standing ovation, she felt a sense of completion that had eluded her since her father's death. Though nothing could bring him back, she had honored his legacy in the most meaningful way possible. By embodying the principles he had taught her and creating opportunities for others to do the same. After the ceremony, as the scholarship recipients gathered around Zoe to express their gratitude and share their dreams, a familiar face approached, Senator Maya Daniels, the former pilot who had called for congressional hearings on airline safety oversight. "Ms. Washington," the senator greeted her warmly. "That was quite a speech." "Thank you, Senator," Zoe replied, still slightly awed to be speaking with such a prominent figure. "The legislation we're proposing is going to be named after your father," Senator Daniels informed her. "The Andre Washington Aviation Safety and Accountability Act. It would strengthen whistleblower protections and increase penalties for knowingly operating unsafe aircraft." Tears welled in Zoe's eyes. He would have been honored. "The honor is ours," the senator assured her. "Your testimony at the congressional hearing next month will be crucial in getting it passed. Are you prepared for that?" Zoe nodded confidently. "I'll be ready." Later that evening, as Zoe sat in her bedroom surrounded by the model airplanes her father had helped her build, she opened his old aviation textbook. Among the careful notes in the margins, she found something she'd somehow overlooked before: a small inscription on the title page, written in her father's neat handwriting. To my Zoe, remember that the sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning. Your wings are made of knowledge, integrity, and courage. Use them wisely, and you'll fly higher than I ever dreamed. Love, Dad. Tracing her fingers over the words, Zoe smiled through her tears. 3 months ago, she'd been ordered to wait outside by someone who couldn't see her potential. Now, she had not only stepped inside, she had changed the very structure of the building. Outside her window, a plane climbed into the evening sky, its navigation lights blinking steadily against the darkening blue. Someday soon, Zoe would be in that pilot's seat, charting her own course through the heavens. And thanks to the changes she'd helped create, countless other young people who might once have been told to wait outside would be flying alongside her. Zoe Washington's story teaches us that courage knows no age limit. When faced with discrimination and wrongdoing, speaking up isn't just an option, it's a responsibility. Her journey demonstrates how systemic racism often hides behind protocols and procedures, creating barriers that seem official but are actually discriminatory. The story also highlights the dangerous intersection between discrimination and safety. When organizations prioritize profit over people and allow bias to influence decisions, lives are put at risk. Those who speak up against injustice are often silenced, but as Zoe proved, a single voice of truth can topple corrupt systems. Perhaps most importantly, Zoe's experience reminds us that preparation meets opportunity. Her technical knowledge, passed down from her father, gave her the confidence to challenge authority figures. This reminds us that education and expertise are powerful weapons against discrimination. Finally, the story shows that true change requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. Zoe's actions were the catalyst, but lasting change came through reformed policies, oversight, and cultural transformation. What do you think about Zoe's incredible journey? Has there ever been a time when you stood up against injustice, even when it was difficult? Share your experience in the comments. If you believe in speaking truth to power like Zoe did, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about everyday heroes making extraordinary changes. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs inspiration to find their voice. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful words you can say are, "No, I won't wait outside."